Everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ask the Experts, where we take a deep dive into the stories of amazing entrepreneurs who are truly making an impact. And today's show, we have the pleasure to be speaking with Casey Ferrand McGee. She is an award-winning journalist. She started her career as a child actress in New Orleans, and Casey is the founder of Casey Ferrand Media. She is also an author of the children's book Curly My Girl, My Curls to Love, whereby Casey combines her passion for storytelling to empower messages to young readers. So I want you to stay tuned and listen to the conversation whereby Casey is going to be sharing her incredible journey, her expertise, insights into the powerful tools she uses to make her clients shine. Casey, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Alka.
Yeah, my pleasure. So let's dig into your career. And it's been fascinating the journey that, followed your journey and it truly has been incredible. So you started as a child actress in New Orleans. Can you
Right.
share with us how has the experiences led you to your approach to storytelling today?
Well, yeah, I grew up on stage and on television, acting in film, in television shows, in musical theater and things of that nature. So I learned early on that storytelling and expression is how people connect. They connect to you through the things you express on stage in that way, but also the stories you share of your experiences and your expertise. So I remember my first time going into a news station at a really early age, probably like 9 or 10, and seeing the behind the scenes of how the news was gathered and told because we, as young performers, got to perform on the local news station. And so that was kind of, I say, where the news bug hit me and
Uh-huh.
where I got the initial interest in media and news and journalism and really the ethics of journalism is something I learned later on, but that's a whole different conversation.
Right, exactly. And so when you how old were you when you got into as a child actress?
Yeah, my first television commercial, I was 8 years old
Oh,
and I
wow.
was the milk girl. I was jumping rope and I turned to the camera and I say, drink milk. And this was for the Louisiana Dairy Association. So I, at that time, became known as the milk girl at school because my friends would see it on TV. And then I went on to do stuff like for the Children's Museum in New Orleans. I'd been in things for like local banks and things of that nature. But then musical theater is where I really fell in love. The art of seeing a story being produced from behind the scenes, from beginning to end, all the weeks of tech and learning the songs and the dances, and then having that big final production at the end and seeing the joy on people's faces when they would see us perform. So that's where I really, really started to love the art of acting.
Right. And do you have in your family, do you have family members who are into theater or the creative side? I mean,
Mm.
producers, directors?
Actually, it's funny. Growing up, not really. I was like the oddball growing up. I remember I also went to a musical theater school where I was the only student from my high school that attended this musical theater school in New Orleans called NOCA. And as a senior, I would go to classes there half a day and then come back to school for recreational sports and things of that nature. But like it was something that singled me out where people some in a way like I was doing something different that the rest of them weren't doing. So they in a way kind of made fun of me and things of that nature. So but it didn't deter me. And then now that I'm growing up, I'm seeing how the creative expression has been all through my family. Like my father is really good with his hands and he does these amazing car designs. He used to paint cars and um, paint motorcycles and things of that nature. He still does that work. I also have a cousin now who is a creative director for some high fashion brands. He
Oh,
also does
wow.
interior design. And then I have another cousin who's actually into special effects. So he works in film and in the industry of film. So he was most recently a part of the Sinners production with Ryan Coogler. So
Oh, wow.
yes, like it's in my blood, it's in my family, but acting not so much. I was like the only one who was more outspoken and in front of the camera.
Okay. And do you like more in front of the camera or will you be or behind the scenes
I
at
loved
that
it when
time?
I did it. Now I'm enjoying kind of taking a back seat and like you said earlier, like helping other people shine and let them see the power of their own stories.
Wonderful. What would you say, Casey, some of the common mistakes or the challenges that you see clients make, or some of the challenges that you have faced breaking through media and television? Because it was way back different to what it is today. And I'm sure today is a lot more tougher for anyone who wants to aspire to get into television. So, what are some of the challenges that people face, or perhaps you have faced in your journey?
Yeah, I tell people who are looking to break into the business and be a reporter, um, it's it's much easier now in a sense to get into news because now it's about the personality and you can start to build a portfolio of work, a body of work far earlier than you I could have when I was in school. So I didn't have access to social media to show off my personality and show off my skill set. Whereas kids and teens now are on social media doing that now. So they have that presence for being on camera. Whereas older adults often are really leery about being on camera. It's one of those things that it just doesn't come naturally. And so if you haven't done it, it's something that um, you get nervous about. You feel like you're not a great speaker, or you say all these bad things about yourself. Whereas really, it's just about talking about who you are. And sometimes that's the thing that people need most to connect with you. So um, I guess some of the challenges I see now is that people don't necessarily know how to use the tools that they're given. I have a production background. I know how to edit video and all these things. So I'm able to take that and help support people to do it now. But I think most people don't understand how to use the tools of social media to grow their visibility and even to get media exposure, understanding the truth behind it is journalists and reporters really just want to hear your story. They want to know your background. They don't care about the credentials. They don't care about the resume. They want to know your life experiences, and those are the things that make stories compelling.
Exactly. And I just want to touch on, social media platforms you mentioned, TikTok.
Mhm.
That's really taken off, and how people, like even today, some people are very skeptical of perhaps using TikTok. Or is it all about dance? No, it's more than just dance, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, and I'm also seeing a shift now where people are engaging with content where people are just sitting and talking to a camera. It feels like you're having a conversation with a friend or someone you know. So I'm not a dancer. I'm not getting on TikTok dancing, and I don't encourage clients to do it. If that's not something you naturally would do,
Right.
don't follow the trends. Be the trendsetter. Be the thing that makes people follow you and follow what you're doing. Yeah, I
Exactly.
don't I don't I don't encourage the dancing if it's not something you do.
Well, exactly. Well, Casey, thank you for sharing that because, I used to hear people say, well, TikTok is, people, oh, I dance. But you made me feel so much better because that's not naturally, it doesn't come to me naturally. So thank you for telling me that I don't have to.
Because and then the thing is, if you don't do that, it's not authentic. People can see straight
Yes.
through it. That's so fake. That's not something she would do.
Right.
Um, she's someone who's, professional. She holds herself with class. She has grace and elegance. Why is she clunking around on TikTok doing these trending dances? And that's
Right.
not necessary in this day and age. It's more about um, sharing those deeper parts of you that people may not know unless you're telling them. Even your own family may not even know these deeper, the vulnerability sometimes, the things that you go through on a day-to-day basis, the like you said, the challenges, the struggles. Those are the things that help people connect.
Exactly. The struggle is real and it's how we express what we're going through every day in life or business. So let's talk about your award-winning journalist, and you transitioned into an award-winning journalist. Well, congratulations, Casey. Truly is commendable. Um, what influenced you to shift to that direction into journalism?
Yeah, so funny thing is, when I was bo going into college, I ended up auditioning to go to the University of Miami for theater. And I got like a $9,000 scholarship, and it was really expensive at the time. And I was like, oh, that's it's not going to cut it. But I also had auditioned, I'm sorry, applied for a number of other schools um, for journalism, and one in particular was SMU in Dallas. And that school gave me all the skills I needed to see that journalism was the path for me. And I tell people sometimes too, my mom took an aptitude test for me, and it said journalism or teaching. She was a nurse, so I knew I wasn't going to be a nurse because I went to work with her one day and they were cutting off a toe. And I was like,
Oh
no,
no.
this is not for me. But yeah, so I did do a little theater when I was at Southern Methodist University, but I really fell in love with the journalism department, getting to, run the cameras and writing scripts and chasing down stories and shooting video, all these things, learning how to do stand-ups and interview people. And so that was where I really start to develop a love for it. And then I was in college in 2005 was when Hurricane Katrina hit in New Orleans. And if people are familiar with that, that devastated large portions of New Orleans. And my family at the time ended up leaving here and moving up closer to where I was in Dallas, Texas. And so coming home after that summer of Hurricane Katrina and being on the ground and actually interning at a station in New Orleans that was covering the devastation and the destruction and the rebuilding of the city,
Mhm.
that was like I was immersed in it at that point. I The city hadn't really come back. We were living in a trailer. Our home had about 2 feet of water in it, so we ended up
Oh
repairing
wow.
it and selling it. And so my dad was down here, trying to help rebuild the city. My mom and my brothers were up in northern Louisiana. And me and my dad were down here for that entire summer. And I just remember going to the newsroom. I wasn't making any money, but I was interning. I was learning so much from the people who I'd grown up watching on the news. And that really sold it for me.
Right. And how old were you at that time?
So at that time, I had to be 2005. I would have been probably like probably like 18 or 19. I was still young. So I
Mhm.
graduated college in 2007 at the age of 20, 21. I think I made 21 after I graduated college, but um, I interned at that station for 2 years, and eventually, once I got out of college, I started putting in resume tapes to get jobs in media, and I wasn't getting any bites. No one was saying yes. I also decided at one point, I was like, maybe I'll go be a teacher. I'll just work for Teach for America. They even told me no. And so finally, I just got in the car. I had all my resume tapes, all of my materials, and I drove to a station in Monroe, Louisiana, which is a really small town. And I hand delivered my tape. I was like, is the news director here? Can I speak to him? He wasn't there.
Oh no.
And so and so I went to the next station, again, did the same thing. And then the next day I did get a call from that news director. And he told me after interviewing me, he said, you know, you being someone who was willing to come knock on a door and be bold enough to take that step showed me that you have what it takes to be a great reporter. You're willing to chase down a story. He called me tenacious, and at the time I was like, what does that even mean? So I looked it up. But yes, it was very tenacious of me
Yeah.
to have the audacity to step into that room and say, hey, you need to look at my tape and make time for me. And when I got into that interview room, he had piles of tapes on the floor, which I'm sure he'd never looked through. So mine was probably in there. Um, and then I got the job, and on the first day, he even gave me a raise. I went from $20,000 a year to $21,000 a year working as a reporter in a small Louisiana town.
Wow. Amazing. Congratulations. Well, you were tenacious. you were tenacious, and but you know what, you got it, you drove all the way. And oftentimes for even like the younger generation now who are aspiring to be journalists, or get into media and television, they don't take that approach, take that step, that if you want something, you got to go for it. It's not going to
Hmm.
come to you. You can't expect. So that was amazing how we just, you did that, you got that done.
Yeah, you got to go after it.
Exactly. And so your approach now, as you coach your clients, you have a very unique way of how you coach your clients. So share with us the emphasis and the power of storytelling, that when you are working with your clients, how their personal and professional profiles really help them to stand out in today's media environment.
Yeah, I use what I call a CFM framework. It's my
What is
initials,
that?
Casey
What is
Ferrand
that?
McGee. So
Oh,
the,
yes.
the
Okay.
framework I use is the core. The core of your story is the heart of what was that thing or that value that made you do what you're doing now?
Hmm.
What's the thing at the core of your being that um, drives you to do the work you're doing? So I speak about this. I do a weekly webinar and I talk about when I was reporting on a tornado in New Orleans that was touching down a mile away from me on the interstate. I ended up on the ground, ground zero, where homes were demolished. And we were being told that there was possibly another tornado coming. And so I ended up on the floor of someone's house whose roof had already been damaged. The windows were blown out. And I'm there like, oh my gosh, this is not it. This is not what I want to be doing to cover a minute and a half of TV, of course, knowing that I'm providing a service to the community, but I'm also putting my life in danger here. So it's like this is not it for me anymore. So that's the core. Like the core memory for me is like where I shifted. This is where I was like, okay, I still can tell stories, but how can I do it in a different way and make sure the stories that are most meaningful to people's lives and impacting their lives are being told in a way that honors them. And then the M in that, sorry, the framework is F, CFM. The F in that is the fight. What's the adversity? What's the thing you've overcome? What's something that you have been, you fought to get to where you are? For me, I also talk about, a lot of times I was covering the worst of the worst in my city. I was talking to mothers after they'd lost their sons and daughters to violence. Or I remember covering a story about a family where six siblings and cousins all drowned at the same time trying to save each other. There was also a story about a young girl. She was 6 years old at the time. She went missing, and her body was found 3 days later in a trash can in front of her mom's home. I covered that story from beginning to end and covered police protests and so many things. And so me kind of being on the front lines, there was a bit of depression. There was some anxiety. There was a lot of, kind of closing myself off to the realities of the things that were happening around me. And that's the fight that I had to overcome. Like, how do I come from this place of being desensitized by the news to finding the important stories that need to be told? So again, for my clients, I tell them, what's that adversity for you? Is it something where you've overcome breast cancer? Is it, the loss of a loved one? Is it job loss? Is it domestic violence? There's all these things, even terrible things that we've been through that are the core of who we are. And how are you now taking that into the M of this, which is the mission? What's the impact of what you're doing? What's the impact of your work? And how are you taking others on that journey with you? So, again, for me, the mission behind my work is to empower leaders to tell their stories and get the visibility that they need through media and social media. So the same goes there. What's that mission? How can people be a part of the impact of the work you're doing? And that's the part that matters the most. Because being in the media or being featured is not about you. It's about the people you're impacting and
Right.
how can they be changed by the work you're doing.
Exactly. And you hit on something when as a journalist, when you're as you said, you have to desensitize. You can't be emotional when you're doing a journalism on a particular story, a tornado, whatever, the case may be, but you have to desensitize. You can let the emotional come in. Have you seen reporters that perhaps they do get emotional and then the job does not get done? Have you experienced in such cases?
Not in the sense where they can't do the job, but I mean, I have seen emotional scenes where even like when I say I'm an award-winning journalist, one of the reports I did was covering that tornado and I got a re award for the breaking news coverage. And during that moment, it's like I'm from New Orleans. I'm someone who's lived through the devastation of Hurricane Katrina. So to see that community hit again, it was emotional for me. But my job is to click in and talk about what's happening so I can make sure that the people who could be impacted are aware of the situation, that they're staying away from danger. But I also had a meteorologist at one point when a hurricane was coming to New Orleans. She also was brought back to that place of Hurricane Katrina and how that devastated the community, ended up crying on air. But again, even as journalists, we're real people too. So sometimes showing that emotion helps again for viewers to connect with you to know that this is impacting me as a human too. So I don't think it's necessarily something that's prohibit us from doing the job. I think it helps enhance our abilities to be able to be vulnerable sometimes and talk about the realness of the situations of the stories that we're sharing without the
Absolutely.
bias.
I'm sorry.
I said
Yes.
without bias.
Exactly, exactly. Well, absolutely. You've got to show that vulnerability to be relatable to audiences. So, Casey, what would you say were some of the common mistakes that you see clients make when to help them stand out in today's media environment? Because today, media and television is difficult to get into. I can
Mhm.
only imagine it must be very difficult. But in your experiences, what are some of the common mistakes that you see clients make, and how do you help them to stand out? And what should they
Yeah.
be doing? Yeah.
So one thing I see is a lot of people just not showing up online. Social media is a free marketing tool, and if you're not using it for the tool that it is, you're missing out. It's a way for people to find you. If you don't have a presence online, if someone's looking you up and they can't see anything that you've done, you have no record of the work you're doing, that's a huge loss right there. Number two, I would say is not staying aware of what's happening around them and being kind of a student of the news. You need to be able to pitch yourself to the media as an expert when the time calls. So being aware of what's relevant, what's timely, what's current events in your area, what's happening nationally, how can you localize it to your own point of view, as an expert who might be in therapy or wellness or in education or a human resources director. Like right now, there's so many stories that can be developed around what resources are available to the 300,000 women, Black women who've lost their jobs in America due to changes in the administration. So, how can you provide an answer, solve a problem that people are having, and what resource do you have to provide them that can give them answers to the problems they're having right now? So, understanding first, one is showing up, and two is making sure that you're aware of what's happening in media so that you can insert your voice and your expertise into the conversation.
100%. So if our viewers who are listening, who want to get into media, what would be the first step that they need to do? What are some of the strategies that you can walk us through to help our listeners to get their foot in the door into who should they be speaking to, and how just walk us through the strategies as to how that can happen.
Yeah. Um, I actually was preparing a post today about the way I have gotten 5 podcast interviews in a week because it's about networking sometimes, just making sure that you're aware of, what podcasters are out there, who's telling the stories that align with what you're doing, and making sure you're, reaching out to them. Um, if you're wanting to get onto mainstream media like the NBC, the CBS, or the network news, Those things are really easy to research a journalist, find their email address online, and send them an email, a simple email, just with the who, what, when, where, why, and why this is relevant to your community is all you really need to do. You don't really need a huge marketing budget. You don't need a PR publicist. You, as a business owner, can put that information out there. And I always say this too, the myth that people think the media knows everything, they don't know anything without the people giving them the information. If it's not the police telling them about things, if it's not the secretary at the school letting them know about this event happening at the school, they need the people in the community to give them the information so that they can report on the stories. And every day they're having to meet a deadline, and they need at least 2 to 3 story ideas at the beginning of the day to make sure that they have something to put on the news for the 5 and 6 o'clock news. So every day they're looking for stories, and you can be that resource to be an interview or an expert, depending on what your expertise is, to be that voice.
Right. What would you say is tougher to get into? Is it radio, television, or is it all of the above? They're all equally tough
They
to get
each take a
into.
different strategy and different
Yeah.
approach, and it takes really just understanding the format.
Hmm.
So, podcasts, I think, are fun to get on because you get to have a 30 to 60-minute conversation about your
Right.
expertise, right? And there's a huge audience of people who get to see it. Whereas media in television, you might have only like a minute and a half, 30 seconds to a minute and a half, the max, maybe 4 minutes in a live interview. Um, so understanding the formats and what your goal really is. If you're trying to get into radio, there's only a few different spots that might be available for those types of interviews. So you think about the places where you're hearing people talk about the things that you want to talk about. Those are the places you're reaching out to. So I had a client who um, they have a nonprofit called um, Girls Play Trumpets Too, right? So I'm looking for outlets that are covering things about music, mentorship, things about education, music literacy. Those are the places that are already having those conversations. So reaching out to those places is key, ideal. I have another client called Daughters Beyond Incarceration. And so when I'm pitching them, I'm looking for people who are talking about criminal justice issues, criminal justice reform, even mentorship as well. So just understanding the things that you focus on, you find those reporters who are covering those things. If you work and you work around health, or if you work around business or education, look for those reporters because those reporters are the ones who you need to just build a relationship with so that they know, hey, if I have a story who I need someone to speak on K through 12 education, she's my go-to person because she's always a reliable source. She always gives a great interview, and she's a wealth of knowledge. And if you're not that person for that particular interview, pass it on to the next so that they'll still continue to see you as a reliable resource. And that next person might be the one who's more suited to do that interview.
Right. Exactly. So you own Casey Ferrand Media, and you coach your clients, public relations, media coaching. How do you tailor your storytelling approach to the diverse clients? Can you walk us through those steps?
Yeah, so I have clients that I work with on a one-on-one basis where I do the work for them, and help build the media momentum for them as their PR, in a sense, specialist. Where I have another cohort of people who work through my Leverage You Academy, which is a community of people. So some of them are kind of just starting out, stepping into this media light and needing a little bit more support. So for them, like the process really starts with a deep dive onboarding where we're taking a look at everything, all those questions I asked before about, what's the core of your story? What's the mission? What's the thing that keeps you up at night? What are the 3 main questions that your clients are always asking you about? Going deep into the intricacies of who you are and what led you to where you are, so we can start to build a story portfolio. So we might be pitching stories related to, I have a client who dealt with gambling and how it led to him becoming someone who learned intricately about the investments and finance structure and things of that nature. And he's built a board game out of it. He's built
Oh,
an
wow.
AI-powered financial literacy board game from his own experience of losing $3,000 on a bet to a gambling addiction. So that piece of his story is really compelling. To see where it brought him now is the piece that we're going to really try to drive to is get people to buy his game, right? But it
Yes,
starts back with that gambling debt or, him starting to build this game specifically for his family on Thanksgiving. And now it's something that he's built a whole company around. So all those little details make up the interesting pieces of the story that lead you to where you are. So
absolutely.
yeah, I would say like have that portfolio of the stories, and his also aligns with AI and tech, also aligns with financial literacy. So there's probably three core things that you work on or that you align with that can be the things you're pitching to and talking to the media about.
Absolutely. And so, Casey, where's the trend going when it comes to media? How do you see the trends evolving? Because every time, trends are always evolving. And so, do you find media now and television, especially, is getting um, a lot more is done maybe not in the studio, like in person, where it used to be like in the 90s perhaps, but it's
Yeah.
less now in the studio and it's more like it's online.
Yeah. And yeah, traditional media is changing a lot.
Hmm.
I have colleagues who are still in the business and it's this concept of doing more with less. And that was the same thing I had to deal with when I was in the media when I was a reporter, but then I had to learn and shoot my own video and edit my own stories without the help of a photographer. So that was back in 2008. Now they're having to tell stories not just online, I mean on television, but online. So the content that they were getting just for the 5 o'clock news now has to be broken down into smaller chunks for social media. So there's this drive to pull more content out of the reporters. And then there's also more non-traditional formats they're going to toward like podcasting. So having a podcast studio where they get to have more long form interviews like this. So those are also more opportunities for people who want to get on the news and get into those spaces to reach out and get access to those spaces. So yeah, there's a huge transition where now even people are looking, news stations are looking for people who already have like a online presence and you kind of come into the station bringing your own audience with you because that only helps them get more viewers. So yeah, I'm seeing a huge shift there. So they're also making their, reporters be more active on social media to get more viewers and more. They actually track in news studios now which reporters and anchors have the most engagement, the most followers, which of their stories or their tweets or their
Really?
posts is going viral so that they can help promote it even more. So yeah, they're tracking all that themselves internally to help with their own metrics. And I always to tell clients too, like follow those journalists who do have big followings because if you get a story with them, they're more inclined to share it on social media, which further expands your potential for being seen even outside of traditional news.
Exactly. That is so interesting. I had no idea that that's where it's going, that they actually track the journalist. Do they have the online presence? So do they have to have the online presence initially? And then as you are a journalist for that particular station, then it has to be amplified even more. So how does it start with? Do they
Yeah.
have to have that online presence? Is that part of the
Um,
criteria or
yeah, by the
not really?
time you're when I was starting out, so social media wasn't a thing.
Mhm.
So 2009 is when I think Twitter and Instagram really started to, I think 2012 is when Instagram really became a thing. But we were being told to start utilizing it. Like we had to tweet 10 times a day. We
Oh,
had to, like each story, we continue to update it online. Live tweeting was a thing at the time. Um, I wouldn't say that it's a mandatory thing that you have a presence, but having it is an asset because the station sees value in that too, because your followers eventually become their viewers. Um, and I will say there's some reporters that I've seen get to higher markets and get bigger positions have a great online presence. And that's only going to serve them to get to those bigger markets.
Right, absolutely. It's all about, amplifying and where do you stand as a journalist. So, Casey, share with us. I mean, you've just had you have an incredible journey, nationally award-winning journalist, 20 years experience. Share with us, what are some of the pivotal moments, in your 20 years of journalism that you have seen amazing shifts in your career, and how has this really how does it stand out in the media environment today?
So, as someone who teaches people how to get on the news, I actually am someone who's still on the other end being featured on the news. So, I make sure that I'm practicing what I preach. So, I understand the dynamics of how to do it, and I'm also able to coach people on how to do it for themselves. Um, so, I pride myself on being someone who's featured as well as someone who was a reporter. So I've been featured for my books. I've been featured more recently as Mrs. Crescent City when I was in a pageant locally. I've been featured to talk about things dealing with breast cancer awareness as a mother. So I think, I guess to answer your question, I think the importance of as someone who's been in the media, understanding how it works and how I can use that skill set for myself, but also use that transferable skill to support the clients that I work with. And I try to enable my clients to do it for themselves. You don't have to, again, you don't have to have the big PR budget.
Mhm.
You can tell your own stories and giving them the tools to do it and the confidence to put themselves out there.
Okay, well, that's great. So, how does one start if you don't have a budget? Like you said, you don't have
Mhm.
a budget, but everyone wants to, and our listeners want to get into the media because, media, spotlight, whether you're a celebrity, everybody wants to get into media, get into television. So if you don't have the finances, the means, the budget, what is the step? What is that initial, like I said, you've got to represent yourself.
Yep.
So how
Yeah.
do you start? How do you start to represent
So
yourself?
I
Who do you
tend to use a
approach?
strategy of creating a media worthy event.
Okay.
So if that's something like, let's say for you, for instance, if you're hosting a business conference or a retreat for executives, and it's something where everyone who works with you is going to come and learn these key things, and these are the topics we're going to discuss. How do you transition what you're doing at this conference and make it relevant to that TV audience so that the producer who's trying to do that segment feels, okay, this is value that is added to the audience, but it's also something she's going to be teaching at this conference. So then it's like you have that call to action. So after you get that interview, they're going to your website, they're getting their tickets, they're doing whatever that thing is that you want them to do as a result of seeing you on the media. So having a media worthy event, creating just simply an email or press release that you send to the media. I recommend doing that at least if it's an event, at least 2 to 3 weeks in advance so they're aware of it. And then another thing is if the media is not coming out to your event, you capture that content and you send it to them again. Hey, this event happened. You weren't able to make it. I understand there was breaking news today, but here's some great video I'm hoping you can incorporate into your shows or you can publish in your newspaper. Have content that you can share after the fact that it makes it even easier for them to say, "Hey, this is great. We can use this. Let's put it in our show." So I hope that answers your question.
It does, absolutely, it does. Exactly. So you have to make that initial call, just go out and just, cold reach because like we said, nobody you can expect it to happen to you if you don't take the actions, you don't take the
Yeah.
steps to make it happen. So Casey,
Yeah,
listen,
but I will say this,
yes,
there is ways,
yes,
even like with me and you, we met at a conference.
yes.
I wasn't up there pitching my services to you or anything, but you felt something in the connection that we made that you were like, "Hey, I want her on my podcast." So if you're showing up in rooms, you're online networking, you're going to be the person that is called to memory by that producer or reporter who, when they need a tax professional or when they need an HR specialist. So just be that person who shows up in the spaces, even online. So if someone's searching tax professional in New Orleans, you need to be on there on the online so they can see you, they can see your work and they see your value. And then they might be that cold outreach that you get from them just because they seen you show up on a space. And just this week again, like I had a colleague reach out to me and say, hey, will you be on a podcast with my client? I have another source where I'm going to be on a podcast with a Forbes podcaster. So there are some services called Quoted. It's QWOTED. Or another one is called Haro, HARO. And those are places where you can sign up for accounts, and reporters are going on there every day looking for people to interview on different topics, business, finance, entertainment, whatever. Set your notifications to whatever is relevant to your niche. So you get notifications about reporters who are looking for experts on this particular topic. And you do that outreach. They're already looking for the people. They're telling you who they want. You be the person that's in their inbox.
Right. So you've got to be proactive, take that step and, make that happen. Casey, let's talk about your book.
Okay.
Curly, curly, curly girl, my cause to love. I absolutely just love that title. Oh my God, that's so beautiful. I love that title. Let's talk about what's the inspiration for writing the book. First of all, congratulations. What's the inspiration that led you to write the children's book?
Okay, so in 2016, I was reporting on the news and my hair looked similar to this at the time. But then I started cutting it shorter and shorter. And then eventually I cut it so short that I could no longer straighten it with a flat iron. So it ended up being really short. And I'm gonna show you the picture. This is me back in, I think this was like 2017
Oh, it's so
when I
beautiful.
started wearing my hair short and curly on the news. And so
That.
um, the first day I did it, I had just the day before gone to a festival and was sweating and my hair just got really, nasty and matted. And I went to sleep like that. And I woke up the next day and I say I looked like a peacock. So that was the day I decided, okay, I'm going to wear my natural curls today on the news. And I actually have a photo someone shot of me while we were out in the field that day. I was covering a story about young people who were shooting paintball guns at people's cars and businesses. But I have a photo of that day, and I look back on it because it was so long ago now. But I've never at the and I'm not sure if you know about relaxed hair and curly hair for Black women. Like I used to use a chemical to chemically straighten my hair.
Oh,
Um, I stopped doing that, and so now my hair is completely naturally curly unless I straighten it out with heating tools. But for me at that time, it was something that I was the first one in New Orleans to do that.
mhm.
Was one of the first in New Orleans to actually wear curly hair on the news, which now seems so awkward to say, but it was a kind of a big deal then. And women who saw me were inspired by it. Young girls would come up to me and, celebrate it. It was different to see a Black woman show up authentically as herself without, a white assimilating look or hairstyle. And so it was celebrated. So the book ended up coming about because this is Bailey. She's a little girl who loves her curls, but um, she gets made fun of at school by the girls who, make fun of her, and she wants to change her curls. So by by the next day, she's like, "Mommy, I want my hair to be straight like the girls at school." But then she sees on the TV that night, she sees a news reporter with curly hair like her, and it makes her want to be curly
Oh,
again. It makes her love her hair again. So this book really is about, representation, making sure that little Black girls see themselves on the cover of a book. And I have so many pictures of the girls who actually wear their hair like this with little red or pink bows because that's what little Black girls do. And they love to see themselves depicted on the cover of this book. So it was really about giving them a gift to celebrate themselves and understand that you are unique, you are special, no matter what anyone says about you, and you should love every part of yourself just as God made you.
Absolutely, amen. As women, we have to, as girls, we have to love ourselves first, to love every part of us, because if we don't, nobody's going to love us the way we do. So, absolutely, I agree with you. You got to love yourself first in order to do that. Casey, this has been such an amazing and powerful conversation. I actually just loved it. And so, your final question, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about you? And how can we support you the best?
Absolutely. So, my website is caseyferrand.com. I'm on social media, Casey Ferrand McGee. And I also, every Tuesday, I am hosting a live webinar where people can come and learn about the strategies to tell their own story, how to get the media exposure. I say in 30 days or less because it's possible with the right strategy and the right approach. And then I also, I'm constantly sharing information and tidbits online for people to understand it. I'm showing up in those spaces to make sure that people can connect with me in a meaningful way. So the webinar is every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central.
Amazing. That's so good. And your book is available on Amazon.
Yes, Amazon. So I have this book and I also have another one, but I sold out. So it's called Leverage You, The Roadmap to Rediscovering You and Unlocking Your Secret Sauce. So if you're familiar with New Orleans, we love a good sauce, a roux, an etouffee,
You do, yes.
a creamy sauce. So discovering your secret sauce is kind of the meat of what I do, is helping you figure out that thing that really helps you stand out and rise to the top. And so that book is really the crux of the work of what I do. And it's built around a lot of the stories I told here today, my journey from college to getting my first job in television to doing it all as an MMJ and then getting out of the box and then my story of my hair story. So all of it is really depicted in that book, but it also takes those lessons of what I learned through those experiences and helps you apply it to yourself, creating some journaling experiences and really good reflections and revelations. And those
Amazing.
both are available on Amazon.
Amazing. So good. Well, Casey, thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey and sharing great insights into the powerful, the tools that you share with your clients, how to help them shine, and also insights into authentic communication, because I think for most, that's where people are lacking in the communication, but to show up authentically. And
Mhm.
for the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today's conversation with Casey Ferrand McGee. And if you want to learn or work with Casey, follow her work on at Casey Ferrand Media, and you will get amazing insights. And we will also drop it in the show notes. But also, don't forget to get her book, Curly Girl, My Curls to Love. And thank you so much to each and every one who tunes in and week out. But also, if you have enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to the channel, leave us a review. In this way, we will have more inspiring guests such as Casey Ferrand McGee and amazing stories. Until next time, be well. See you soon. Bye bye. Casey, that was amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in today.
Thank you.